All right, so what we're gonna do is go ahead and draw our coordinate plane. And I'm gonna draw an angle in the first quadrant. And what I'm gonna do is instead of drawing the little angle to show or the little arrow to show where I went, just drop this down and make it a right triangle. We're gonna draw right triangles for these because we're gonna start to do some trig with our angles. So like sine, cosine, tangent, and all of that. Okay, so this is your angle theta. That's your point of view, which is 0, 0. This is the x direction. This is the y direction. And we call the hypotenuse r, and this is y. You get my little toothpick thing out here. If you go the whole way around and it makes a circle, that would be the radius of your circle. Coming with me there? That's why it's called r. So please don't change those letters because that's the reason that they're called that. Okay. So now we're going to list out these. It is SOHCAHTOA, but we're using these letters instead. So sine is opposite over hypotenuse. If this is your point of view, what would opposite? Perfect. And so this one's r over y. Do you remember how to say this one though? Cosecant. Good job, cosecant. All right, let's do the next one. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So that would be x over r. How do you say this one? Secant, good, would be r over x. Can't write and talk at the same time. All right, and then tangent, y over x. And this one is cotangent, x over y. Now we're going to have a brief conversation about where these are positive and where they are negative. So if you are in quadrant 1, your x value is positive and your y value is positive. So what I'm going to do is draw another little coordinate plane. They are all positive. And when I say they, I mean all the trig functions, sine, cosine, tangent, cosecant, secant, cotangent. All of these are positive in the first quadrant. Oh, and I forgot to say this. R is always positive. Just by definition, R is positive. Okay, we got that? R is positive. If you go into the second quadrant, X is negative, Y is positive. So any one of these involving an X is not going to be positive anymore. Do you see what I'm saying? So that wipes out tangent. Do you see how that has an X? And cotangent. And then which other ones have an X? Cosine and secant. So the only two that are still positive in quadrant 2 are these two, sine and cosecant. They are still positive because they don't have an X with them. We're writing where they're positive, which ones are positive there. Okay, because we're going to play the name that quadrant game in a second. In quadrant 3, both X and Y are negative. So in order to end up with a positive value, come with me on this. You need both an X and a Y because then the negatives would cancel out. Okay, so out of these, which have both an X and a Y? Good. Those will be positive in the third quadrant because the negatives will cancel. Again, we're writing which ones are positive. Then all the rest would be negative. All right, and then in the fourth quadrant, what is what? I did the other ones. What is this one going to be? X is positive, Y is negative. So anything that involves a Y is going to be negative. So which ones over here involve a Y value? All right, sine, cosecant, tangent, cotangent. So cosine and secant would still be positive there because they don't have a Y value. So this is where they're positive. Here's how people remember this. All students take calculus. It's ASTC is the way people remember that. So now we're going to play the name that quadrant game. If anything is negative, it cannot be quadrant 1. Do you get what I'm saying? Hello? If anything is negative, it can't be quadrant 1 because they are all positive there. Okay. So do you see how this says sine less than 0? Sine is negative. With me there? It cannot be quadrant 1. We're just going to narrow it down. So knowing sine is negative, it cannot be this one. It says cosine is positive. So out of these, 2, 3, and 4, which quadrant is cosine positive? 4. Do you see how cosine is positive in quadrant 4? 4 is your answer. Please write a Roman numeral. They're supposed to be Roman numerals. Let's try it again. I'm going to skip this for a second. Do you see how it says secant is negative, less than 0? It means it can't be quadrant 1. Quadrant 1 is out, which is usually the case, right? Then it says cotangent is positive. So which one of these is cotangent positive in? 3. Do you see that right there? Quadrant 3? All right. That's it. That's all you're doing. Name that quadrant. If you get totally stuck, you have a 1 in 4 chance of flat out guessing. All right. And then in this one, do you see how tangent is negative? That means it can't be quadrant 1. Cosecant is positive in quadrant 2. Now, if you were told that both were positive, then you would say quadrant 1. I just didn't do one for quadrant 1 because everything's positive there. All right, do you get what I'm saying there? Because your first job is to draw your triangle in the correct quadrant. All right, so let's try this first example here. We'll do our break after this one. All right, so go ahead and draw your coordinate plane. I drew mine kind of big. So now we have to figure out what quadrant we're in. Do you see how it says tangent is negative? That means it can't be quadrant 1. That's out. Sine, good. And it also wouldn't be 3 because tangent's positive there. It says sine is positive. So which quadrant is sine? Good. So you're going to draw your triangle in quadrant 2. And theta, your point of view, is always at 0, 0. That's your point of view. That's the you are here on the map. Okay. Now, whenever you get a negative, don't put that on right away, because I don't know whether the negative goes with the 4 or the square root of 33. So just ignore that for a second. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. So 4 is the opposite. Square root of 33 is the adjacent. So place them, then decide which one gets the negative. So which one gets the negative? Good, because it's in quadrant 2. So your x value is negative, your y value is positive. Sweet. How do I get r? Good. 4 squared plus negative square root of 33 squared equals r squared. It's your Pythagorean theorem. So 4 squared, good. When you square something negative, it will turn positive, and also it would just be 33, perfect, because the square root and the squared cancel. I did that on purpose. And I did that on purpose too. So you get just 7. Once you get there, the hard work is done. That is like your work. Then you just go answer all the questions. All right. Sine is what over what? Good. So this is your point of view. That would be 4 over 7. And so cosecant 7 over 4. Beautiful. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So that would be negative square root of 33 over 7. So this is negative 7 over square root of 33. To be clear, when you have a negative fraction, you can put the negative with the numerator, the denominator, or just stick it out front. That's usually what I do, to try to put it out front. Right. Yeah, that's what I was just saying. It doesn't matter where you put it. It doesn't make a difference. Yes, but I like to write them all out first and then go back. You can do whatever you want. That's personal preference, right? Tangent is opposite over adjacent. That one was actually given to you in the problem, though. Negative 4 over square root of 33. And so cotangent, negative square root of 33 over 4. The reason why I wait to fix them is if you rationalize this, it gets messier. And then if you go to flip it to get cotangent, it becomes harder. So I just write them all out first. Which 2 do we have to go back and rationalize? Yep, secant and tangent. All right, so this will be, I wrote a little bit too big, negative 7 square root of 33 over 33. I'm sorry, I kind of ran into my triangle there. And then this one will be negative 4 square root of 33 over 33. So once you have your triangle, you just go list out all the answers. So you decide what quadrant it's in, You use your Pythagorean theorem to get your other side, and then you write out your answers. Cool. So we're gonna do the same thing we just did. The information's just given to you in a little bit of a different way, okay? But it's the same thing. So draw your coordinate plane. I'm gonna try and leave a little bit more space here. And we're gonna plot that point, -2, -5. Third quadrant, good. So you wanna draw your triangle in the third quadrant. Are you guys all good on why it's third quadrant? Where that point would be. You go -2 for X and -5 for Y. That would put you at the point -2, -5. Do you get what I'm saying there? Okay. Because I didn't draw little tick marks for it because you don't really need it. All right. And then what are we going to do to get R? Perfect. And R is never negative just by definition. That's a positive value. And again, when you square things, they turn positive. So like -2 squared is +4. And then this is +25. What? So that's 29. And then square root 29. I mean, that's just what it comes out to. You can't split 29. If you got something like square root of 24, like you could split that. What would that split into? Like, yeah, 2 square root of 6, like you'd have to split it up. Okay, but 29 does not split, so you just leave it. All right, then you just literally write all the answers. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So if this is your point of view, the origin here, what is your opposite over hypotenuse? Yep, perfect. And then flip it over for this one. All right, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So -2 over square root of 29. Secant is negative square root of 29 over 2. You just flip it over. It's just the reciprocal. All right, and then what is tangent going to be? Good, it would be -5 over -2, but the negatives cancel. So just 5 over 2, and then cotangent 2 over 5. And that's what I was saying. That's why in quadrant 3, tangent and cotangent are the positive ones, because those negatives cancel out. All right, which 2 do I have to go back and Well, sine and cosine. Sine and cosine. So this one would be -5 square root of 29 over 29. And this one is -2 square root of 29 over 29, which I would argue doesn't really look a whole lot better, but whatever.
Is that like a rule?
Yeah, you're not allowed to have a square root in the denominator.
That's just dumb.
Well, and again, that's why I flip them before I go back and do that at the very end. All right, this one, again, we're going to do the same exact thing, but the problem is just given to you in a different way. This time, instead of a point, you're given an equation of the terminal side. So like you're being given an equation for this line. What you want to do is find a point. Can you stop talking over me? You want to find a point that's on that line, and then the problem will be exactly like the one we just did. Now you can plug in anything you want for X as long as it's what? This says X has to be greater than 0. So I want you to use your common sense. Thank you. Why is 3 a good choice? 1/3. All right. So if you plug in 3, now I always get somebody that's like, what if I want to plug in 6? Fine, but smaller numbers are easier to deal with than bigger numbers, and you don't get a calculator, right? 1/3 times 3 would be 1, the whole point, plus y equals 0. So if you plug in 3, that's what you end up with, because the 3 and the 1/3 cancel, just give you 1. So what is y then? If you -1. Good. Now the problem is exactly like what we just did. What quadrant is 3, -1? Fourth quadrant. Draw your triangle in the fourth quadrant. 3 is the x value, -1 is the y value. You're going to do your Pythagorean theorem and then list out all your answers. So 3 squared, 9. -1 squared is +1. And then I'm left up here explaining that 9 plus 1 is 10. And so r square root of 10. Again, if it doesn't split, you just leave it alone. And then we're going to write out all the answers. So sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So that would be perfect. When you reciprocate that, it would be square root of 10 over negative 1. That would actually just be, negative square root of 10. Hey, Miss Cole, I want to leave it over 1. Fine, that's 100% correct. Okay. Cosine would be 3 over square root of 10. So secant is square root of 10 over 3. And then tangent is opposite over adjacent. So that would be good, perfect. And then cotangent, -3. Or -3 over 1 if you want to leave the 1 in there. Now there's always 2 you have to go back and fix. Which 2 are they? Sine and cosine. So this would be -1. I'm not going to write the 1. Square root of 10 over 10. And then this one is 3 square root of 10 over 10. I'm going to have us do one more that we just set up. I won't make you write all those out again, but I just want us to practice drawing the triangle one more time. Like you have to choose which quadrant you're in first. That's like the first battle. But again, there's only 4, so get stuck, just pick one. So this says sine is negative. That means it cannot be which quadrant? Cannot be 1, which is usually the case. And then it says tangent is positive. So which quadrant? So 3. Good, you guys are getting that. The first part of your delta math is just name the quadrant. All right. Don't put the negative anywhere yet. Place the numbers and then decide which one gets the negative. 3 will go where and 5 will go where. Remember, it's sine. 3 is the opposite. Good. Yeah, 5 is r, the hypotenuse. Which one of those gets the negative? The 3. But I know what you're talking about, so hold on a second. And I made this one of the locker combination ones to see if you would remember 3, 4, 5, 3, 4, 5. Now there's one other thing though, and I think this is what you were talking about over here, because that's not correct yet. Which number has to be negative? Why does the 4 also need to have a negative? Went to the left, it's in quadrant 3. Cool.